Okay, I think we're recording. Here we go. Well, thank you for joining us. It's morning for me. I'm in Chicago in the United States. And our topic today, I'm going to be your moderator talking about rediscovering your identity as a childless woman. So we're all here this week. All the work that Stephanie has done to bring us together is because parenthood did not become part of our story. And when that happens, it is so common to feel unsure of your identity. And we live in this world, whether we wish we could change it or find the ways to do it, but we live in a world that measures womanhood often by parenthood. And when this life that you imagine does not include children, it shakes the foundation of who you thought you were, who you thought you were going to be, and often leaves you wondering, so now what? So this conversation today matters because we're not asking whether identity is lost without parenthood anymore. Hopefully this hour, I'm going to try to keep it to an hour, we're going to explore how identity can be rediscovered, how we can reclaim our identity and redefine it in ways that feel powerful. So before I get started with introducing you to our beautiful panelists, I just want to thank Stephanie, who I'm in such admiration of how she's created World Childless Week for all of us. She has done so much to build truly a global community, as we saw in the chat. I didn't introduce myself yet. My name is Lana Manikowski. I already told you I'm in Chicago, but to give you a little snapshot of me, because I'm mostly going to be moderating today, so you won't hear much about me, but I went through 7 years of fertility treatments starting at age 37, and those 7 years left me without a baby and zero resources of how to navigate this unexpected childless life. So the identity thing is something that I have been through and understand the challenges that go around it. And luckily, I have found a way to rebuild my life. I have recently wrote a book. I have a podcast. I really have a desire to help women create a life they love, even when it turns out differently than you thought. So when Stephanie decided that this was a panel she wanted to put together and invited me to be your moderator, it was really important for me to bring you different voices and different stories of how you end up childless and wanting to rediscover your identity. So I'm soon going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves. And I hope you understand that while we tried to capture every possible reason that you might end up childless, we just don't have enough Zoom screens to include everybody's story, but the people that are sharing today, some are sharing their story for the first time publicly. And if you can, flood the chat with love and gratitude for the power that they are showing today by sharing their story. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to first ask our panelist, Sadiya, and then I'm going to go to Corey, Idalise, and Emma. You're going to meet all of them individually here the first few minutes. And they're going to tell you where they live, maybe a little bit about what they do for work or enjoyment, and the circumstance that led them to be childless. So again, I'm going to start first with Sadiya, if you want to come off mute.
Hello, everyone. It's a good morning from me. I'm here in the United States, just like Lana. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. It's right smack dab in the middle of the country. I recently moved here to be closer to family as I'm kind of continuing on with life after I've really taken time to bounce back from an IVF round that didn't take. So to give you a little bit of background about me, I'm an educator. I love children. I've done my master's in elementary education. I always have said the little people are my people. I speak their language. I really started to take a look at where me and my husband, we've been married for 10 years now, wonderful 10 years. We started to take a look at our fertility a few years into our marriage. I was in my young 20s. We weren't conceiving. And so we started to explore fertility treatments when we realized we have a very, not very well-known diagnosis called azoospermia. So that is something that we deal with and in the infertility world, we consider that as a male factor infertility situation. Not a lot of people might know that typically outside of our world and our bubble, because that is something that affects males. And typically we hear fertility affecting who? Females. So that's kind of the perspective I'm walking in with from my fertility journey. And what my husband and I like to do outside of everything we navigate is we're business owners. We love to watch movies and we love outdoor activities. I've recently gotten into pickleball to keep myself active. And we are really liking our life that we're setting up here in St. Louis and navigating being business owners. So it takes up a lot of our time. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Sadiya.
Lana.
All right, perfect. Well, Corey, you're going to go next.
Hello, my name's Corey. I live in New York. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I have that New York speaking really quickly, but I'm going to do my best to slow it down. I am also an educator. I teach middle school students, 12, 13-year-olds. So, you know, that really, really weird time is where I spend my days. But I don't know if that makes me weird as well, because I enjoy it. I am single. I have always thought that I would be a mother. And then just a little bit about my journey as I was getting older and thinking about like, oh, if I meet somebody tomorrow and then I get married and then have a child and then I'll be this old when they enter kindergarten. I was doing the math in my head constantly. And then finally I was like, let's try this. Let's try this on my own. My mom was like my biggest cheerleader, supporter. She was so psyched. She was like, let's do this. I was like, this is going to be easy peasy, done. Let's go. I had frozen my eggs, you know, a few years before. So I was like, all right, great. We'll be done in like, you know, 2 months. And so spoiler alert, it wasn't so easy. And after 7 rounds of IVF, I had decided just to stop. My mind was shot, my body was shot, and that's what brings me here. But I'm super excited to be here. I am really nervous. I am sharing my story publicly for the first time with you all, but let's do it.
Thank you, Corey. And I appreciate your willingness to share because I know it takes a lot in front of a group of people you don't know, but know that we're all cheering for you today because you have so much value to add to our conversation. And we're going to move now to Idalise. So Idalise, you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Idalise. I'm 43 years old and I live in Puerto Rico, so in the middle of the Caribbean. Right now, I have a beautiful view to the ocean, so this is a great place, and I know that many of you are maybe in a very different scenario, so it's so exciting to be here and sharing our shared experiences, right, from very different parts of the world. So I live in Puerto Rico with my husband, and I'm a pharmacist by profession, but I currently am a college professor. So I'm adding to the list of all the educators online today. My my diagnosis of infertility came up when I was 38 years old. I married what I consider to be a little bit older. When I was 35 years old, we got married. And at 38, after trying and seeking the doctor's advice, we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility. I went through a couple of rounds of intrauterine inseminations, and those weren't successful. And then after 3 unsuccessful IVF cycles, we decided to remain child-free. So that is how we are living right now, and we are embracing our child-free life. Obviously, that term, we didn't identify necessarily at the beginning with that term. We felt more childless than child-free, but as things are going right now, we are definitely embracing our child-free life.
Wonderful. Thanks, Idalise. And I should mention, Idalise does speak Spanish. So if anyone wants to address anything in Spanish, we will try to catch that in the chat, or maybe put it in the Q&A so it can pop up to us. If there's anything you'd like Idalise specifically to help you or to speak to in Spanish. So we're gonna move to Emma.
Hi everyone, so I'm Emma and it's I think just about 2:10 here in the UK. Not going to be like the Caribbean, it's absolutely pouring down here in the north of England. So I'm from North Yorkshire, I'm 52, and just to continue the theme, I am a secondary school head teacher. So I teach 11 to 18-year-olds. So again, like Corrie, if she's weird, then I'm weird too because I love it. So my journey then in terms of infertility probably started actually when I was about 13, and I had issues with my health and then ended up having to have hormone treatment. This was obviously at my age quite a long time ago, so there were no sort of guidelines as to what the implications might be from that. I ended up having really difficult and heavy periods, and it took until I was 43, 42 rather, to get a diagnosis of endometriosis. And I was diagnosed with endometriosis. I'd had several ruptured ovarian cysts, so I had one ovary that had died. And they suspected adenomyosis, which for anyone who doesn't know is endometriosis in your womb. And they told me that I had a very, very small chance of conceiving and an even smaller chance of being able to carry full term. So I had to make a really difficult decision around my health, my life versus my desire to be a mum, which had always been very, very strong. I was single at the time as well, which felt like another added pressure. I'm still single now, but I ended up making the decision to go with the total hysterectomy. And whilst it doesn't cure endometriosis, from a health point of view, it absolutely changed my life. But obviously, from the infertility side of things, it was game over for something that had been a dream of mine. So I just hope that today, all of you out there are going to feel some sort of spark of joy and hope as we keep talking, seeing that you've got a group of women here who are happy and living life to the full, and it is possible.
Thanks, Emma. And I didn't plan everyone to be educators. And I should add that I got my degree in elementary and special education too. So although I never taught in the classroom, I guess we just all naturally found each other for some reason or another. But thank you very much to each of you for your introductions and your willingness to share some of the tender parts of your diagnoses and your route through life that brought you to this point of being childless. So as we move into the heart of the conversation, I want to first say that one of the most common experiences when parenthood or motherhood doesn't happen is the way that it shakes our identity. And for so many of us, our picture of the future, it just included this role of parent, or some of us, I'm in my 50s, this role of being a grandparent. And we imagined what it would mean for our marriages, our relationships, our friendships, and where our place is in all of those things. And when that picture changes, it can feel like the ground beneath us is shifting and leaving us in this wonder of who am I if I'm not a mother? And that's where I want to begin today with Corrie. I'd love for you, Corrie, to talk about what parts of your identity felt most shaken when you realized that you wouldn't be childless. And then after Corrie, we're going to hear from Idalise.
Sure. Yeah. So when I finally had stopped, I was kind of like, who am I? I didn't know where I was going after this. So for me, I've always been an achiever. Anything I put my mind to, anything I worked hard at, I usually saw results. And this was the first time that I worked so hard and it wasn't good. My dream of being a mother just wasn't going to come true. It wasn't, if I worked a little harder, like it just wasn't going to happen. And I felt different than even other women going through the same process because I was alone. Yes, I had my family, but I didn't have a partner with me that was, kind of like grieving with me. So I felt different in that sense. I felt kind of broken at that point. And what was even harder for me is that I was feeling so broken inside, but I still showed up for everyone, to work, for my family, my friends, with a smile on my face. And it was just exhausting. And then I felt like I was also disappointing everyone. I felt like I was disappointing my mother. My brother was never going to be an uncle. My nephews would never have cousins. And I just put all this shame on myself. So that's really the part of me that was most shaken, because I was like, wait, I can do things when I work hard. And now all of a sudden I was like, well, no, you worked hard and it's not happening. So where do I go from here?
Thank you. Yeah, I can totally resonate with I have one sister, so I was the person that was going to bring the cousins to our family. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Idalise?
Yes. Um, I feel like so many parts of my identity were shaken after I ended up without children. But I think that one of the ones that had the most impact was what was my purpose in life. Like that was really hitting hard during that time. I had always felt that I had such a strong motherly instinct since I was a child. I I was named like when I was in elementary school, when I was 7 years old, 10 years old. I was always like checking out for the well-being of my classmates and making sure everyone was behaving. So I sort of was portrayed as the mother of the group in my class. I have always had a very strong connection with small children. It's like my gift. Like I can really connect with them in a really deep level. And when I came with when my infertility diagnosis came up, I felt like so cheated by life. I felt like this was such a not funny joke. It's as if I always, when I talk to people close to me, it felt to me like, I don't know, like I was given this huge talent, and then at the same time, I wasn't given the opportunity to express this talent that I had. So it felt totally, it shattered my identity and my sense of purpose. I was constantly asking, then what am I good for? What is my life gonna be like? What are my future life projects? Like I have no idea what I'm gonna do because I had all of this so clearly planned out. So that was really a very strong feeling for me. I felt totally dispensable, like I had no sense in my own existence. Many of my relationships were impacted, my relationships with friends. They were all having children, or they already had children. And I felt so out of place in their conversations about their kids and what their kids were going through, and the events, the birthday parties, the baby showers, you name it. I also felt totally disconnected with my family. For example, in my relationship with my mother, I felt like I was a disappointment to her, like I wasn't fulfilling my part in continuing the family because I'm an only child. So that felt really profoundly hurtful. My relationship with my partner, and one thing I struggle the most is intimacy, not just physical intimacy, but also emotional intimacy. So all of these things are impacted when you're given a diagnosis of infertility. And overall, I just felt like I was a misfit in society. So it was a total, I would call it like an identity crisis.
Yeah, I think very accurate. So thank you both for sharing those, because I resonate, and I know I saw, the head shaking here, like so many of us can resonate with that. But identity does not have to end here. And after the heartbreak, there's often just these small moments. Maybe it's a habit, maybe it's a relationship, a friendship, a single thought that begins to lift us into something new. And it might in the beginning feel hard and fragile to even realize that there could be more. But these are the moments that are going to start to shape this vision for your life. So I'm going to ask Corey here in the hot seat here again. I'm going to first ask Corey and then move on to Sadiya, but asking you, like, what helped you begin to move from that heartbreak into a way of imagining something new or creating a new vision for your life?
So really funny, Lana, that you're picking on the one that's the first time talking about this. That's cool. Totally cool. Yeah, at that point when I knew I was done and I wasn't going to be trying anymore, I knew I needed help. I knew that I could not move ahead on my own. I asked my doctor for recommendations. They didn't really have many recommendations for me when I left the clinic. I listened to podcasts. I read blogs. I was just finding anybody. Since I felt so alone, I was just finding anybody out there that was like me, that I wasn't so different. And by the podcast, the blogs, and just even looking online, I realized I wasn't so alone. There were other people out there like me going through the same kind of journey and having the same feelings that I was feeling. I ended up going through a coaching program that focused on infertility, which was super helpful for me because what it did for me was that I was learning tools that helped reshape my mind frame. And what I realized what was happening is it was my mind that was bringing me down and my perception of how others perceived me. Like I felt like everybody, oh, poor Corey, you know, she'll never be a mother. And oh, is she going to be okay? What's she going to do? Nobody was thinking that. It was me thinking that everybody was thinking that about myself. And I then just from that started working on me. I started making myself a priority. I started focusing on things that I wouldn't be able to do if I had children. Last minute plans like, oh, you want to meet for drinks? You want to meet for dinner? Yeah, sure. Like, I don't need to find a babysitter. Planning trips. I've never traveled so much than I have in the past, 2 or 3 years. Dating, I focus on dating because I kind of like gave that up for a little, a few years. I was like, no, I'm focusing on this part. And then even something as silly as like that designer bag that I've been eyeing for, the past couple of years. I was like, yeah, we're doing it. We're getting that for me. And then I think also the biggest thing was that I started opening up about my story. I started, I opened it more. I had, a small knit, close circle of friends that I, would talk to through this, but then I started opening up. I started telling people at work. Apparently I'm telling the world right now on this panel, but really just focusing on me. And there's so much out there, and I'm so much more than being a mother. Like, Corey is pretty awesome, and I can bring a lot to really anybody that I come across. So that's kind of where, from that help is kind of where I started realizing like there's more out there and things are going to be okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Corey. All right, Sadiya.
Yeah, for me, the heartbreak is such a huge part of my journey. I feel like that's really what colored so much of what I dealt with. It still exists. I like to think of an analogy I heard online about grief being a ball in a box. And when it's a really big ball, it's taking up all the room in the box. But sometimes that grief, it doesn't change, but the box expands. It gives room so that it bounces around. It's in one corner sometimes, it's on this side, sometimes that side. So that's kind of how I think about the grief from the heartbreak of the journey of before I really made that new vision for my life. So I think a big part and maybe a lot of people can identify with this, is accepting that grief and giving it room can be quite difficult. But for me, that was really that step that really helped me move from heartbreak into this new kind of chapter of life. And that sounds so easy. Sadiya, just deal with the grief. Great. Why didn't I think of that? Right. For me, dealing with the grief really meant I'm a firm believer in therapy, talk therapy. It's really helped me through many, many years of my life. And it will always be, I think, a part of my self-care regimen and just what I do to take care of myself. Along with that, I found a different type of talk help that was grief-centered, grief-focused coaching. So just for anyone who maybe has heard both of these terms and isn't too clear about it, I definitely firm believer in therapy. And if anyone here is proponent of therapy, definitely with you there. Sometimes that's more for, I feel, psychological conditions or for helping with different mental health areas. And coaching can be a different model, a resource that I use that really helped me kind of see a different option for life, because it dealt with development and goal setting, improving my performance in life and things like my job. I could talk about how I improved in work because of working through the grief with my personal relationships, things like that. So that mind shift really changed when I looked at self-perception, very similar to what Corey said. I was so down on myself. I was a disappointment to so many people and factors of life. But when I really spoke to them, they said, "You're not disappointing at all. I think you're brave. I'm glad you're here with me." So that really helped me to change that perception within myself with just one small exercise that I still hang on to today. Think about 3 things that you're proud of yourself. Do it in front of a mirror, do it while you're laying down, whenever it crosses your mind. 3 things that you're genuinely proud of yourself. And some days, and I know there's lots of people who can identify with this, it was just the fact that I got out of bed. I'm proud of myself for getting out of bed, my feet hitting the floor, because sometimes the grief can be so heavy for us. We're not able to do that. And guess what? There's some people who don't try and get up out of bed and go through their day. So I'm proud of you for doing that. That small dialogue within myself started to heal things with my self-perception and feeling that identity of who am I? What do I have to offer that's not just childbearing? So that really helped to piece my identity together. That was one of those first things that really helped to move to create that new vision of life, making life for somebody I was proud of.
That's beautiful. Thanks. All the good analogies and things tools that maybe some people can take away today from this conversation. So I like the box one. That's a really good visual. So, okay. How are we? I see the chat is blowing up. Everyone is applauding all of you. If you haven't been watching the chat to the panelists, people are just really loving what you're doing and saying, so keep it up. So let's zoom out now just a little bit and talk about one of the biggest questions that comes with identity, and that's womanhood. And many of us, womanhood, we always just link that to motherhood. And we had this body that had these organs and reproductive organs, and we just thought, it's going to show up and it's going to work, and almost as though the two were inseparable. And when motherhood doesn't happen, it can leave us questioning if we still belong in that definition that includes womanhood. So over time, many of us discover a new way to define womanhood that feels strong and true to us. And I'm going to ask Emma first, and then go to Idalise. But how have you defined what womanhood means to you, or how you see the relevance of you as a woman?
Okay, so this was a real big one for me, especially after the surgery. And I'd had a lot of surgeries. I felt quite detached from my body. But I think before I talk about some of that, one of the things I think that's really good to do is to think to yourself, what are these qualities that we think are attached to motherhood? And what are these qualities that we think are attached to womanhood? And if you actually stand back and pause and think about it, there's words like nurture, care, love, selflessness. But you can strip any identity away from that, because they're really qualities that any human being, I think, would want to aspire to have or to be. So it makes me smile now, because when you're in it and you're in the eye of the storm, you just feel so unhappy and confused about it. But I smile now thinking, we don't have issue with, oh, I'm a, go-getting woman, I'm a feminist, I've got a career. We're all okay with that. And yet for some bizarre reason, we still want to hang on to nurture and care and all that sort of stuff. And we want to tag it around motherhood. And it's daft, really, when you say that out loud. So that's something that I would do, is ask yourself, what are those qualities or the things that you think are missing? And then try and look at it really objectively, because you'll find that you're not missing. So in terms of reconnecting with your body, I think this is a great thing to do, even if you haven't become childless due to surgeries. But for me, I felt quite detached from my body. So after the surgery, on the one hand, I felt physically better. And I would look in the mirror, and I don't know, it was quite bizarre. It was like I couldn't see me. It was like I was constantly seeing the person before the operation. And I really have, it's been a long journey, but I struggled with finding my identity as a woman again. But the key thing was, as I say, reconnecting with your body. I think as a single woman as well, there was a time when I thought, well, I haven't got a partner, so I've got no one to have that emotional connection with either. I've got no one to like reaffirm or tell me that actually I'm beautiful. Then I thought, actually, of all the disastrous boyfriends I have had, you probably wouldn't have done that very well. So I thought, come on, Emma, just really go for this yourself. You can do it. So I tried anything and everything. But again, I'd say to you, on your journey, don't be afraid to give something a go. So I've done running, and I'm not a natural athlete. I have done aerial fitness, pole fitness. I have done all sorts of things. Dance. One thing I will keep meaning to try is burlesque dance. But go to these classes, and you'll find that even if it's not for you, and you only do a couple, all of a sudden you do, the dance, especially, and the pole fitness really was something that I felt good about, because I saw my body differently. I was able to look in a mirror during those lessons and see an attractive woman. But when I was doing the pole fitness, I was also able to see physical strength. And I think it was a reminder that your body does great and wonderful things for us all every day, doesn't it? And actually, one bit went a bit wrong, but we're still running, we're still working. I think if I was a car, if I was like, James Bond's Aston Martin, and I'm still working effectively, but maybe just one little bit had fallen off, I won't be too bothered. I still feel like an Aston Martin. So I just think you've got to maybe reframe that thinking. But definitely doing physical activity, it helps with your mindfulness. But it really did help me reconnect with my body. And something else that I've just done recently, I've got a tattoo, my first tattoo, probably going to be my last, but I love it. And for me, it felt like I was making a decision about marking my body, as opposed to the number of surgeries I've had and the scars I've got. This was my choice, and it's been so empowering. I'm glad I waited a little bit, because you never want to attach bad feeling to something like that, because it's there for life. But that's really given me a boost as well. So think out the box is what I'm saying. You'll find what it is. Is it belly dancing, or is it, I don't know, maybe it's something artistic, creative, but find a way where you can connect with your body, yoga, whatever. And I think for me, that made me realize that just because I've lost organs, I'm still an attractive, great woman. So I hope that's been a bit of help.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I love the Aston Martin example, because I think it's true. We get so caught up on these specific organs in our body that may or may not be there anymore, or may not work the way that we thought. And we allow that to define all of us. And I talk about this a lot. Like, think about our brain. Like, we often don't think about our body, including our brain, and the amazing work that is done each day without us even trying, the way that we wake up and the things that we just innately do. And I think we get so focused on what isn't working, and we forget to explore what hasn't worked yet or what could be working every day that we don't notice. So beautiful. Thank you. Idalise, could we transition over to you with that question?
Sure. So this concept about womanhood is very interesting for me because it touches like two very diametrically opposing ideas that I have in my mind. So on one side, I've always been very consciously set in the idea that womanhood is not a particular fixed set of rules. I was brought up in a very open-minded family, and I actually studied in an all-girls school. So we were taught for a long time that we should be independent, that women can do it all. It was all about female empowerment back in the 90s when that word wasn't used, but that's basically what we were taught, that we could do absolutely everything. That men could do, that women could do, that regardless of gender or identity. On the other hand, on the other side of my brain, obviously, there is this unconscious idea that is completely impacted or influenced by societal expectations, our patriarchy, the society in which we live that assigns specific gender roles to women, to men. And while I always thought that I was very liberal and very open-minded and very feminist, when I came to my diagnosis of infertility, when that time came, I was actually shaken by how much the unconscious part of my brain, that part that had been influenced by society, was taking over my concept of womanhood. And infertility actually made it even more clear to me that societal expectations are just absolutely impossible for women, regardless of our motherhood status. Because what I was hearing from my female friends who were mothers is that they felt like they couldn't keep up with society's expectations of motherhood either. So it was like a no-win situation. We're never enough if we dedicate our lives to our careers. We're never enough if we dedicate our lives to having children. If we're single, the question is, when are you going to get married? When you get married, the question is, when are you going to have children? When you have your first child, the question is, when you're going to have a second child. When you can't have any children, then the question is, when are you going to adopt? When are you going to do IVF? It's like it's never enough. And what I started to realize is that limiting this concept of womanhood to motherhood was so reductionist. It was reducing all our essence practically to our reproductive potential to the reproductive potential of my body, and that wasn't fair. That's not fair for anyone. So I started to redefine womanhood in terms of not actually womanhood, but humanness or humanhood. Regardless of whether I'm a woman, I'm a man, or whatever my identity, for me, being a human became embracing all the positive and negative sides of my personality, all my individuality, all the things that make me unique, all my intellectual capacity, my sensibility, my vulnerability, my creativity, my talents, my passions, my flaws, everything that made me human, right? So it is hard to do. It's not easy to do because you have to do a lot of introspection and you have to question things that what I came to realize is these things everyone questions at some point in their lives, even my friends who are mothers. they feel that it comes a time when you question, who are you? Besides any kind of role that is serving society, that is serving another person, who are you? What makes you unique? And that for me is my womanhood, right? Embracing the good, the bad, and just living a very vulnerable life like we're doing all here, and helping others with our example, being mentors, and just seeing that womanhood is so multidimensional and it's so very different and particular to each person. But it doesn't have to be tied to your role as a mother, to your role as a sister, doesn't have to be tied to serving other people's needs. So I know it's a lot, but I invite you to try to find what is that makes you unique, and that is totally independent of your reproductive capacities.
Yeah. Wow, that was beautiful, because if I'm hearing you right, it's like we put ourselves in these compartments, and when you're in that compartment, you're not allowing yourself to expand and see things beyond what a societal expectation is of being in that role or in that gender. Yeah. Wow. The chat's blowing up. Y'all gotta check it out. Okay. So now we're going to bring it in even more personal, if that's possible, but outside of infertility and outside of the roles you once thought you'd have, how do you see yourself today? Like, who are you now in your passions? Maybe it's in your friendships, relationships, daily life. I'm going to ask Emma to start with this one, and then Sadiya is going to follow up after that. So how would you say, if someone says, who are you now? How would you define that?
Simply, I'd say I'm a strong, courageous, beautiful woman. But obviously, it's taken a bit of a journey to get to that point, for all of us. And I think for anybody who's watching, listening to this, just trust the process in that sense, because when you're in that journey or on that journey, you wonder, is it ever going to end? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? And hopefully we are here today to say, yes, there is. And it's not straightforward though. It's not like you get to the end of the tunnel and yeah, yippee, you're perfectly happy and life's just peachy. Because as we've talked about really already, grief is there. It sits with you all the time. Grief is inside you. Grief moves with you. And I think Sadiya said this earlier. She mentioned acceptance. I think for me, acceptance has been the key thing. I think I fought my illness, or tried to. I will go to work. And again, tapping into what's just been said about the stereotypes and all those pressures we put on ourselves. You know, I will go to work, I will show up, I will be like the perfect daughter, the perfect head teacher, the perfect colleague, all that stuff. That didn't really help me in the end. And then even after my surgeries and hearing the news of infertility, I won't let that get me down. I'll fight that. I'll beat that. It'll all be okay. And in some ways, that's quite good. I think it's good to have that fight in you. But actually, there are some battles that, in a way, you're not going to win in that old-fashioned black and white sense of the world. It's not about winning and losing. So acceptance for me has been a massive thing. Actually, I don't have to fight, because all I'm doing in a way is fighting myself. I need to let that grief flow. And through doing that, that's how I've become more confident and I've become happier. I think the other thing that's been interesting is, I'd say, the word evolution. So I feel as a person, through infertility, I've evolved, and I never expected that. So you will find, if you try and indulge in a bit of self-reflection, whether it is through counselling, whether it is through yoga, meditation, or journaling, again, a great thing to do, that you will start to think about things, or you'll challenge your own thinking, you'll challenge previous thinking, you'll question so much. And I never expected to have benefits of losing my dream. And I've evolved as a person. I mean, I wouldn't have done loads of running. I wouldn't have tried things like that. I used to have really long blonde hair, and look at me now. And I'm a bit more like, so what? If I want to dye it green, I'll dye it green, it'll grow out. And that wasn't me. I probably was channeling into some stereotypes and expectations, maybe without realizing it previously. So I think when your dreams get shattered, in a way, your life's rule book, well, it's already been ripped up, it's been chucked away. So actually, you have to evolve. And I think that's been another key word: acceptance and evolvement. And I've also focused a lot more on friends and family and hobbies. And I always had a great set of friends, and I've got a lovely family, but I'm also an only child. And, you know, I feel that pain of, my parents have been amazing, but I know, you know, you've got Halloween coming up, you've got bonfire night, you've got Christmas coming up, you go shopping, you see all those lovely things, and you think to yourself, oh, if I'd had a little boy or girl, I'd have bought this, etc., etc. And I know my mum, which doesn't say it, but I can see that in her. But I've really tried to focus on tapping into my inner child as well. And I think that's another thing that as adults we don't do enough of. And you should do it, whether you're a mum, a dad, what, you know, again, irrespective of gender or whether you've got kids or your age, we should all tap into our inner child. And over the summer, I said to my mum and dad, come on, I want to go on a day trip to the seaside, and I'm 52. Do you want to come with me? And we went, and it, typical British weather, by the way, it tipped it down. So it was an absolute classic day at the seaside. But doing things like that has then created joy and memories. And you think you're not going to have them because you haven't got children. But doing things with friends, I like cooking. So actually I've said, right, come round with everybody when you want to, you know, maybe near Christmas they'll come round to mine. I'll put on a bit of a spread. And those are the things that I wouldn't have done. And actually, I'm sharing the love, and I'm also nurturing myself while I'm doing that. So, yeah, I think that's who I am now. That's who I am now.
You sound pretty awesome. I wish I lived closer. We met over Instagram, and you had blonde hair when I met you. So when you said, you know, like, I've seen different versions of you kind of continuing to evolve. And I think that's what this is all about, just allowing the next thing to come in and say, yeah, this feels fun for now, or nah, that's not a good fit. So you're a beautiful example of that. Sadiya.
Thank you, Emma. That was such an engaging answer, and I really identify with so much of what you said there. I want to address something I saw in the chat in my answer, incorporated that into my answer. Catherine asked a beautiful question. You know, sometimes you wonder, is there life after the grief? And I'm here to tell you as a testament, Catherine, and I challenge you one up from there. I think there is definitely an alternate, beautiful life along with the grief. So that's just something I invite you to explore, that concept. What would that mean for you? What does that look like? When I think about the characteristics I imagined for myself as a woman, as a mother, and all the different facets, as Italy said, the different facets of how we serve people and show up for ourselves and our loved ones. When I think about those characteristics, in the concept of motherhood, oh, I would have been this, I would have been very compassionate and loving and a creative mom and a patient woman and all these things I imagine for myself. I pause and I think, well, today, right now, this September 20th of 25, am I compassionate? Am I loving? Am I creative? Am I patient? I think about those characteristics I would associate with motherhood. For me, womanhood and motherhood were almost like the Venn diagram. If you think about those charts we learned in school, for me, it was a circle. It was like motherhood, womanhood is all the same. When I stopped to reflect, wow, I've really enmeshed the two. Could they possibly have different definitions? A lot of us are teachers here. Definitions matter, right? Words matter. So that was part of that reflection, that when I think about who I am today, I turn that compassion that I would have given a child. What if I turned it inward? I was compassionate to myself today, and I was patient with myself today and loving. What if I was creative with this problem I'm facing at work? I've seen that really show up in my life, where today I can definitely tell you I'm a really fun and I'm a great aunt. I'm a very present daughter. I've been able to help, my parents, my in-laws, in ways that my other siblings or my husband's siblings who are married with kids, like, they couldn't show up. They didn't have the ability. That's something I have on my side. I'm a very engaged wife. All those things I had imagined, oh, I'm going to have my perfect life as a mother, I really have access to it now. And so that's something, when I think about the woman I am today and who I am now, that's really what I identify with. And I think acceptance, Emma brought up a beautiful thing about acceptance helping you get to who you are. For me, acceptance is kind of like a window, and I just hope you can open it up a little bit, a crack, to let some hope in. And maybe in another day, you open it, have the strength to open it wider and wider, to have a different view of yourself and an acceptance of exactly where we are in life today together.
Thank you, Sadiya. You have such a, I don't know, you great visuals, like you are allowing us to create in our brain with your examples. So I really love that. So we're coming close on time, but we still have some more good stuff I want to get through. So hang with us. But I know a lot of people probably, I saw how the chat was kind of blowing up over here too, about what it is of like, who am I now? Because I think we've always carried this expectation that there is this rule book for what makes you a woman. And there are probably a lot of people that are opened up to maybe new ways of thinking about that. And I'm hoping that this conversation and specifically these last couple points that we've made will help people see that we have more control over the definition of who we are than society's expectations. So I'm going to kind of bridge on what we just talked about and ask Idalise and Emma to answer this question for the woman who's watching and is maybe contemplating this, who am I now? Like, what is one thing you would want her to know when she thinks about who am I now?
Thank you, Lana. So the first thing that I would like to set up is, I think we can all agree that we're all very complex, beautiful, amazing. Some days good, some days better, some days not so great human beings. Like, there's a lot going on in a person. So if you're asking yourself, who am I now? I would challenge you to think that you don't have to really answer that question right now. You don't need to have a big answer to this question at any point in your life. There is no single word that can possibly define who a person is at a given moment in time in its wholeness. We're not taglines. People are not taglines, okay? People are not mother. People are not teacher only. People are so many things. So I would challenge you, don't try to put yourself in this box of a tagline. You have so many things to offer. I would rather focus on what you can do right now, today, at this instant, to positively contribute to whatever is around you, and those things that you can control. The smile that you offer a stranger, the kind gesture you can offer anyone you come up with, the telephone call that you give a friend that you haven't reached out to in a long time, the garbage that you pick up from the front of a building and you put in the trash can. It's the small things that actually define who you are. Who you are is not a word. Who you are is what you decide to be at every instant in life, how you want to how you actually present to the world. So when I had these big questions in my life, I just said, okay, this is too much. Who am I now is too much. Let me just concentrate in the things that I can control right now.
Thank you. Emma?
I think it's hard to follow that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. When I was asking myself that question, who am I now? The answer I often had was, I don't know. And it put panic, there was a literal panic inside me. I don't know who I am anymore. And like I've said, I did things to reconnect with my body. I focused on hobbies. I love my music. I've started playing guitar. That's all great. And I would advise you as well to indulge in some of your hobbies. And again, that's the inner child. But I think if we go a bit deeper, that's not just about having the time or actually trying to find the new evolved version of yourself. I think you have to exercise some serious self-love and self-compassion. And it's the type of thing we hear and we're told to do. None of us do. But, you know, when we're going through life thinking we've got this plan that, you know, we're going to get married at such and such an age, we're going to have children, what have you, we don't ever really think about how we're going to love and nurture ourselves. And it's like that old expression of, you know, make sure you smell the roses along the way. You've got to pause, I think, and give your grief the space, give your grief the space. And then imagine if that was somebody else grieving, how you would treat that person, and do the same for yourself. So I think with the grief, the other thing you have to remember is you're not just grieving an unborn child, you're grieving a life, you're grieving a whole lifestyle, a whole future, a whole world, basically, that you've not had. And it can feel really, again, quite a disconnect to grieve for something that you haven't had. But you need to be validated for that, because that's absolutely fine and right, and you can and you should. And I would suggest as well, find something, whether it's an ornament, a picture, a plant in the garden. I have a little fairy garden in my garden, and that's my space. That's my space where I've put my grief. And I like to sit out there with a cup of tea or a glass of wine. And if I want to be sad, I can be, but sometimes I can be happy as well. It's a beautiful place to be. And I think those moments are part of that self-compassion, giving yourself that space to grieve. But even the little things in self-compassion, like making the cup of tea, pouring a glass of wine, having a bubble bath, those tiny little things that maybe don't cost a lot of money and aren't a lot of effort, but on a normal day-to-day or before infertility, you kind of take it for granted, don't you? You go have a bath, you don't think about it. And I suppose that comes back to a bit of mindfulness. I think it's about being really self-loving and compassionate towards yourself in terms of that grief, because you would do it for anyone else, so why not do it for yourself?
Yeah. And I had a thought when you were talking about the fairy garden and being sad out there. I think that we carry this misconception that when you get to this point of acceptance or finding your identity, that you're never sad anymore. And people often look at themselves, and when they see themselves sad, they think, I'm not there yet. And there is a beautiful journey that you can be grieving the rest of your life and still be growing the rest of your life. And I think a lot of people get stalled in the growth and seeing their growth. They're growing, they're doing, but the minute they have a griefy moment or a cry or a tinge of jealousy when their best friend announces a pregnancy, they think, oh, I've got so much further to go. So thank you for bringing that up, because that really resonated as something that I think people can take away from today. And Corey, I'm going to call on you before we close things up, because you came out so strong in the beginning and you've been sitting there and I haven't tapped into you for a minute, but I would just love for you to just leave a sentence or two for someone listening today, just about like, what's a closing reflection you'd like to leave them with from today's panel?
Well, I just want to jump back to when you said that there's the grieving and the growing, because there are still so many times that like you do get that tinge of sadness, but then there's also those times where you're like, wow, I've come so far, and people have said to me, I see a difference in you, where I don't see it in myself, but people have outwardly said that. But I think if I were to leave one last thing, if there's anybody out there like in my situation, I've realized that life doesn't have a set timeline. Like, you have to do this by this age, you have to do this by this age. There's no set timeline. For me, I've learned, and this took a long time to realize it, I'm right on time, and I'm going to be okay. And if that's something that I can like leave for this, like that's really it. Like we're gonna be good.
Wow, I love that. That's a beautiful place for us to wrap up today's talk. I want to acknowledge the panelists who showed up, of course, Stephanie, who brought us all together. And I hope this last hour you recognize that we are all walking through hard places. And these moments when identity feels broken, we also have the opportunity to see that you can rebuild your life, and it can be in new ways. And my hope is that you leave today's webinar remembering that it's not being a parent, that not being able to be a parent doesn't erase who you are. You have a story to tell, you have a life to live, you have new experiences to explore. And your identity isn't gone. It is just waiting for you to rediscover it, maybe reclaim it in ways that bring you the peace and the possibility back to your life. So I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank our panelists for their honesty and openness. And yeah, so we're going to conclude our conversation here. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of World Childless Week.